Good day, welcome to Behind the Crime Scene. Today, we're heading deep into the Australian outback, to a speck of a town where the sun bakes everything it touches, where grudges outlive friendships, and where one man's disappearance turned a handful of neighbors into suspects beneath a sky that never blinks. This is the true story behind Last Stop Larrimah, the disappearance of Paddy Moriarty. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Behind the Crime Scene. Your support keeps us traveling to forgotten places like this one, places where truth and legend trade names in the heat. The road to nowhere drive 500 kilometers south of Darwin, and the world empties. The asphalt ribbon of the Stuart Highway stretches through red dirt and wiry scrub, the horizon quivering like a mirage. Out here, the wind hums, birds vanish into dust, and the sign says it all. Larrimah, population 12 people. A dozen souls clinging to a place too stubborn to die. During the war, Larrimah was a supply post for soldiers moving north. When the army left, so did the reason for being. A railway closed, houses faded, and the desert crept back. What remained was a pub, a tea house, a handful of homes, and the ghosts of better days, and among them was Paddy Moriarty. Paddy was born in the 1940s in County Kerry, Ireland, a world away from crocodiles and dust. He grew up chasing sheep across green hills, restless, hungry for somewhere bigger. In his 20s, he boarded a ship bound for Australia. He drifted through cattle stations across the Northern Territory and Queensland, known as a hard worker, a heavy drinker, and a man who laughed loudest at his own jokes. Friends said he could fix a fence, ride all day, and spin stories that made the bush feel alive. But the outback changes people. Loneliness becomes company. Whiskey becomes conversation. By the time he reached 70, Paddy had outlived most of his mates. What he hadn't lost was his mischief, and his dog, Kellie, a red kelpie that followed him everywhere. When he settled in Larrimah in 2006, it suited him perfectly. Cheap beer, wide skies, and no one telling him what to do. He rented a small cottage across from the pub, close enough to stumble home, far enough to avoid too many questions. To some, Paddy was the heart of the town. To others, the spark that kept the fuse burning. At the center of Larrimah stood the Larrimah Hotel, better known as the Pink Panther Pub, a building painted an impossible shade of bubblegum pink, topped with a faded tin roof and guarded by a fiberglass panther lounging beside a 5-meter concrete beer bottle. Inside, the air smelled of dust, rum, and fried chips. The walls were a museum of jokes and relics, road signs, army badges, newspaper clippings, and mounted snakes curling like question marks. Behind the bar was Barry Sharp, publican, animal lover, raconteur. Barry had moved to Larrimah nearly 30 years earlier. He'd turned the pub into a zoo of sorts, with wallabies, galas, and even a blind crocodile named Ray housed in pens out back. Visitors remember Barry's booming laugh and his tea served stronger than his beer. He loved the oddballs who drifted through, and Paddy was one of his favorites. Every evening, as the heat began to fade, Paddy and Barry would sit on the veranda, beers sweating in their hands, trading stories about snakes, storms, and women long gone. But in Larrimah, friendship and irritation often shared the same chair. Barry sometimes joked that if the heat didn't kill you, the gossip would. December 16th, 2017, that Saturday was like any other. The temperature hovered above 35 degrees. Flies owned the air. Paddy arrived at the pub around 4 in the afternoon. He drank his usual beers, chatted with Barry and a few travelers, and as twilight turned the bush orange, he called it a night. He climbed onto his quad bike. Kellie balanced on the back and rumbled off toward home. A ride of less than 500 meters. The sound of the engine faded. And that was it, the last anyone ever heard of Paddy Moriarty. 2 days later, when he didn't return for his evening beer, Barry knew something was wrong. Paddy never missed a drink, never left Kellie behind. Police arrived from Catherine. They found his hat, wallet, and keys on the kitchen table. A plate of dinner waited in the microwave. Nothing was stolen, nothing broken. The quad bike was gone. So were Paddy and his dog. How does a man vanish between a pub and his home, on a flat highway with 12 witnesses to silence? For days, helicopters combed the bush. Volunteers and officers walked shoulder to shoulder through spinifex. Drones buzzed over sinkholes and creeks. They found beer cans, footprints, animal bones, everything except what they sought. If Paddy had collapsed, Kellie would have stayed. If he'd been taken, someone would have seen lights or heard barking. The silence became louder than any proof. The Northern Territory Police declared it a suspected homicide. But when your pool of suspects numbers 11, every conversation feels like interrogation. Across from Paddy's house stood a hand-painted sign, Fran's Devonshire Tea House, homemade pies and cakes. Behind it bustled Fran Hodgetts, then 75, short, energetic, hair dyed bright auburn, apron always dusted with flour. She'd run the place for decades, feeding truckies and gray nomads, famous for camel, buffalo, and crocodile pies. Fran loved her garden of tropical plants and stuffed toys hanging from the trees, but she hated her neighbor. Their feud began over noise, dogs, and gossip. Fran claimed Paddy threw roadkill into her yard, poisoned her plants, and cursed her business. Paddy accused her of selling dodgy pies and posted a sign steering tourists to the pub instead. Locals called it the Pie War. Tourists laughed. The residents didn't. When Paddy disappeared, suspicion leapt the highway. Police searched Fran's property, drained her septic tank, dug up flower beds, and questioned her live-in gardener, Owen Laurie, a quiet man in his 60s who did odd jobs around town. They found nothing. No body, no blood, no trace of Kellie. Fran told reporters, "People drive by yelling murderer. It's destroyed me. She has always denied involvement. So has Owen. And no one has been charged. Still, in Larrimah, whispers travel faster than evidence. Could a feud born of petty insults really end in death? Or had the desert written its own ending for Paddy long before? The investigation pulled back the curtain on a community fraying at every seam. There were two rival progress associations, each accusing the other of stealing money or sabotaging projects. Someone allegedly killed a pet buffalo. Another stole a historic train carriage. Someone else installed speed bumps without permission. Tiny grievances became legends. One man was banned from the pub for stealing Mars bars. Another accused of arson. The bush has long memory and short tempers. Journalists began arriving, drawn by the absurdity, a murder mystery with a population you could fit in a minibus. Most stayed a day. 2 decided to stay longer. Kylie Stevenson and Caroline Graham rolled into Larrimah in 2018. They were journalists, friends and storytellers with a fascination for the forgotten corners of Australia. Kylie had met Paddy a year earlier while traveling with her baby. He'd held her child, offered her a beer, and laughed about how the world kept shrinking. When he vanished, she couldn't stop thinking about that laugh. The pair rented a room at the Pink Panther, notebook and recorder in hand. They interviewed every resident, every passerby, police, searchers, truck drivers, psychics, even a diviner who claimed to trace energy lines to Paddy's resting place. Out of that obsession grew the Walkley award-winning podcast Lost in Larrimah in 2018. Followed by the 2021 book Larrimah. Their meticulous storytelling revived national interest and eventually inspired HBO's 2023 documentary Last Stop Larrimah. What they found wasn't just a crime, it was a portrait of isolation itself. A town shrinking until every conversation echoed. In 2018, Northern Territory Police requested a coroner's inquest. It would take years to conclude. Witnesses testified about arguments, noises, and rumors. Officers described searching every borehole within 20 kilometers. In April 2022, the coroner delivered his findings. Paddy Moriarty was killed as a result of criminal acts, most likely connected to a conflict with a neighbor. He referred the case to the Director of Public Prosecutions for review. Yet without a body, confession, or physical proof, the DPP faced the impossible. In 2024, prosecutors declined to pursue charges. The file remains open. The truth remains buried. What is justice without evidence? And how long can truth survive when the outback itself erases footprints overnight? The ruling gave no closure, only confirmation that something terrible had happened. For the people left in Larrimah, it deepened the silence. Friendships splintered. Neighbors avoided eye contact at the postbox. Every gust of wind carried another rumor. The police still call it an open investigation, but out here, open feels like a word for city people. Out here, Cases simply fade until the land reclaims them. After the inquest began, Barry Sharp, the man who had poured more beers than anyone could count, grew frail. He told visiting reporters that the town felt cursed. "Too many grudges, too many ghosts," he said. Barry had come to Larrimah in the late 1980s chasing peace and animals. He'd built aviaries behind the pub, collected rescued wildlife, and turned the Pink Panther into a roadside curiosity that kept the town alive. He liked to say that every emu, snake, and croc deserved a second chance, just like him. But by 2019, illness had caught up. He died that December, leaving behind his animals and an emptier Larrimah. When news spread, travelers stopped to leave beer cans and flowers at the gate. The pub went on the market soon after, another sign that the town's heartbeat was slowing. Who is Owen Laurie? While the spotlight often fell on Fran, her gardener Owen Laurie became a shadow in the narrative, quiet, private, hard to read. He'd worked around the territory for years, fixing engines and fences, content with silence. In interviews, people described him as polite but distant. Police questioned him many times. He never wavered, never confessed, never charged. The coroner noted that Owen and Fran both had ongoing disputes with Paddy, but offered no definitive conclusion about guilt. For many, that uncertainty was worse than a verdict, because in a town this small, everyone becomes a theory. Stevenson and Graham kept coming back. They watched as houses emptied, weeds swallowed fences, and kangaroos hopped down the main road. Each visit brought new fragments, a forgotten photo, a rumor from a traveler, a clue that led nowhere. They described the experience as chasing a mirage. The closer they got, the more the truth dissolved. Yet they also grew protective of the people there, even those accused. Everyone had lost something, a friend, a reputation, a reason to stay. When HBO adapted their work into Last Stop Larrimah in 2023, the world finally saw what they had witnessed, a blend of humor, suspicion, and loneliness that felt almost mythic. Viewers laughed at the eccentricities and then realized they were watching grief in disguise. What does exposure do to a town that never asked to be known? Can telling the story save it, or does it finish the burial? The documentary ignited fascination far beyond Australia. Podcasts, Reddit threads, and documentaries debated the clues frame by frame. Tourists began detouring off the Stuart Highway, taking selfies beside the Pink Panther, asking locals if they knew the murderer. Some residents welcomed the attention. Others felt invaded. Fran told journalists she just wanted peace. But peace is hard to find when the world wants your tragedy on demand. For urban viewers, Larrimah became a symbol of the Outback's mystery, of community collapse, of the thin line between neighborly banter and lifelong hatred. For those who live there, it's just home, or what's left of it. Police files remain active. Reward notices still sit in folders. But without remains, every theory ends in the same dead end. Maybe Paddy was ambushed that night. Maybe the desert swallowed him and Kellie within hours. Maybe someone knows and will carry it to the grave. The coroner's 2022 conclusion of homicide stands, yet legally, the case is only an absence, a blank space in the record of the Northern Territory. What keeps people obsessed isn't the possibility of solving it. It's the reminder that even in an age of satellites and search engines, one man and one dog can vanish completely. Today, Larrimah hovers between existence and memory. Fewer than 10 residents remain. The pub changes hands. The tea house opens when the weather cooperates. A few travelers stop for petrol or curiosity. Most drive on without realizing they've passed through the heart of one of Australia's strangest mysteries. The Pink Panther statue still reclines by the road, smiling at nothing. Tourists snap photos. The wind howls through broken fly screens. At night, the desert cools quickly, and the stars sharpen. Somewhere beyond that silence lies whatever is left of Paddy Moriarty and Kellie. Stories like this don't end. They settle. They become cautionary tales whispered over campfires and pub counters. They remind us that isolation can twist ordinary people into something unrecognizable. Paddy was not a saint. Fran was not a villain carved in stone. They were human, living too close, too long, under the relentless weight of heat and boredom. And maybe that's what makes Larrimah more haunting than any ghost story. It could happen anywhere people stop forgiving each other. What would you do Cut off from the world when every argument echoes louder than your own thoughts? How long before loneliness turns into paranoia and gossip into survival? If you're still watching, thank you for staying with me until the end. Subscribe to Behind the Crime Scene so we can keep uncovering the stories the dust refuses to hide. Paddy Moriarty's disappearance is officially a homicide, unofficially a legend. No body, no conviction, just a town suspended between truth and myth. Maybe someday the desert will give him back. Or maybe it already has, in the way his story refuses to die. Because in Larrimah, even silence has a voice. You just have to listen long enough to hear it.